Hey everyone, Effie Revenge here. Today's story is a perfect example of what happens when a toxic family crosses every line. Stay tuned until the end to see exactly how a tyrant's life falls apart. Let's get into it.
My name is Mary Cole. I'm 32 years old. And the day my father decided to celebrate throwing me out of his house, he didn't just throw a party. He sent invitations. Actual paper invitations. Printed at his own shop. Cardstock, for God's sake. I found out later he'd handed them to 6 neighbors, 3 church families, and both of his bowling teammates. The front read, "You're invited to a freedom cookout." The back had our address and a start time of 2 p.m. He had printed 40 of them. I didn't know any of this when I pulled into the driveway that Saturday afternoon to collect my last box. What I saw first was the banner. It stretched the full width of the garage, 12 feet, maybe more, printed on the same heavy vinyl he used for storefront signage. Professional grommets, clean edges, the kind of quality he rarely put into actual client work. Red block letters on white background. "Goodbye, Deadweight. Don't come back." Below it, in smaller text, like a tagline, "Raised her for 32 years. She gave us nothing. Today we celebrate." The grill was going. A folding table held 2 cases of beer and a sheet cake. The cake was decorated. I'm not exaggerating. With a fondant image of a woman sitting on a couch holding a laptop, surrounded by dollar signs raining down on her. Someone had written, "Finally," in blue icing across the top. My father stood at the center of it all, wearing an apron that read, "Boss of the Grill," like the universe had personally validated him. When he saw my car turn in, he spread his arms wide, grinning at the crowd. "There she is! Come to collect the last of her things, folks!" Applause, actual applause, from neighbors I had waved to for 3 years. My Uncle Darren was on the porch, already drunk at 2:15, swinging a bottle of light beer like a conductor's baton. He shouted that a 32-year-old woman with no real career was a disgrace to her father's name. A neighbor I recognized from the block association called out that my poor dad had been carrying me since my mother died, and it was about time someone said it out loud. My younger sister Jenna was near the grill in cut-off shorts and full makeup, phone up, already filming. She'd added music to her live stream. She'd given it a title. I found out later it was called "Freeloaders Get What They Deserve." My grandmother Patrice sat under a patio umbrella, hands folded, wearing the expression she always wore when cruelty was being performed in the name of principle. Then Darren threw a hot dog at my car. It hit the driver's side window, left a grease mark. "Last free meal, sweetheart. Hope it was worth it." The crowd laughed. Someone's kid pointed. Jenna zoomed in on the grease mark and captioned it, "Absolute joke," in real time. I sat in the driver's seat for 5 seconds and felt something happen inside my chest. Not breaking, the opposite. Something that had been bending for 3 years went very, very still. I got out of the car. I walked through all of them without saying a word. Into the house, down the hall, to the laundry room where my last box was sitting on the floor. Someone had left a note on top in black marker. "Starter kit for real life." Inside were dryer sheets, 2 packs of instant ramen, a half-used roll of trash bags, and a printed list of apartment complexes in town, as though they were releasing a stray animal into the wild and wanted to feel charitable about it. That almost made me laugh. Almost. When I came back outside, Darren was telling the crowd that my mother would be ashamed of what I'd become. My mother had been dead for 9 years. He knew exactly where to dig. I put the box in my trunk. I lifted my phone. I took the photo. My father called after me. "What's that for? Evidence for your therapist?" I looked at him across the driveway, across the banner, the cake, the neighbors, the grease mark on my window. And I said the first and only words I'd spoken since arriving. "No, for later." Then, I drove away. Part 2. The story they told. The version my family had been telling for years was simple, clean, and humiliating in exactly the way people love, because it let them feel superior without examining anything too closely. Mary Cole, 32, never married. The engagement had fallen apart 2 years earlier, when her fiancé realized she had no real ambitions. Works from a laptop, calls it a career, can't explain it at dinner parties. Lives in her father's house, contributes nothing. Drifts through life on someone else's stability, while her hard-working father runs a real business with real employees and real overhead. This story played beautifully at church, at neighborhood cookouts, at Jenna's hair appointments and Darren's poker nights. It was the kind of story that let everyone feel both sympathetic toward my father and comfortable in their own choices. Some people just never grow up. He's too soft on her, always has been. Tough love is the only thing that works with that type. The truth was messier, quieter, and far more useful to all of them, as long as it stayed unspoken. I had moved back 3 years ago because my father's business was drowning, and he didn't know how to ask for help without it costing him something. Cole Precision Signs had been my father's company for 18 years. Commercial signage, vehicle wraps, monument signs, trade show displays. Decent regional operation, 12 employees at its peak, contracts with shopping centers and municipal clients across 3 counties. My father, Richard Cole, had built it with genuine effort in his 40s and had spent his 50s slowly mistaking momentum for management. Then the real problems came. Material costs spiked 40% in 14 months. 2 major commercial clients, a mall developer and a regional bank, restructured their vendor lists, and Cole Precision lost both contracts in the same quarter. A warehouse lease came up for renewal at a rate that had nearly doubled. 2 estimators quit within 6 weeks of each other, taking institutional knowledge with them. And my father, rather than restructure, borrowed against the building, hired his brother-in-law Darren at full salary to do a job that didn't need doing, and told himself the market would correct. By the time I moved back in, the company was surviving week to week. The books were a disaster. The receivables were fantasy. The tax filings had quiet errors multiplying in the background. My father told people I'd come home because I'd failed out of my lease after the engagement ended. The truth was that he'd called me crying at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday and said he didn't know how to make payroll Friday. I came home in 48 hours. My job, the one my family found too complicated to respect, was freelance operations consulting. I helped small and mid-sized contractors manage the back-end machinery of their businesses: vendor compliance documentation, bid package assembly, contract administration, deadline tracking, scope of work cleanup. The kind of work that exists in the gap between what a company does and what a company can prove it's capable of doing. I was good at it. Good enough that I had 3 long-term retainer clients before I moved back and could work from anywhere with a laptop and reliable internet. To my family, this meant I didn't have a real job. To my clients, it meant I was the reason they kept winning contracts. I was good at one thing above everything else. I could see a disaster coming before it arrived. I could look at a business and identify the exact point where negligence would become catastrophe. I could reverse engineer the failure 3 months before it happened and put something in place to stop it. That skill made me invaluable to strangers. It made me invisible to my family. The first month, I reorganized the invoicing system. The second month, I caught an expired certificate of insurance attached to a municipal resubmission, a mistake that would have cost my father a $58,000 school district contract and potentially a multi-year relationship. Third month, I found 2 years of sales tax filings with consistent errors. Fourth month, I discovered 3 equipment leases set to auto-renew at rates that had nearly doubled, and nobody had flagged them. Then I found the receivables situation. My father had over $140,000 in outstanding invoices, some going back 11 months that had never been formally followed up. One bookkeeper had quit without a proper handoff. Another had been hired without proper onboarding. Nobody had a complete picture of who owed what. Money that should have been funding operations was sitting uncollected while my father borrowed against the building to cover the same gap. I spent 6 weeks cleaning it up, collected $74,000 in outstanding receivables through proper follow-up, payment plans, and in 2 cases, formal demand letters. That money kept the company breathing for the better part of a year. My father never mentioned this to anyone. When clients called during dinner and I handled a crisis that saved a job, he acted like I'd accidentally done something mildly useful. When I renegotiated payment terms with 3 suppliers who were about to put the account on hold, he told relatives I helped with some paperwork. When I covered a $6,200 payroll shortfall on a Friday, because he would sooner have collapsed than admitted to his employees that he couldn't pay them, he took the transfer and said, smiling, "Family doesn't keep score." That sentence, family doesn't keep score. People only say that when they are the ones benefiting from nobody counting. And I kept not counting.
Software subscriptions for the company's design and project management platforms, on my card. Overdue utility balances on the production facility, on my card. Insurance reinstatement on the work van after a lapsed payment, on my card. Rush material orders when my father forgot to place them, and a job was about to miss its install window, on my card. Vendor deposits that would have killed 3 active projects if they'd bounced, on my card. Darren's van payment, twice, because he'd told my father he'd handle it and hadn't. Jenna's rent, 4 times, because she'd asked, and I'd said yes, and she'd thanked me by telling people I was bad with money. I never paid everything at once. That's the key detail. I paid the margin, the shortfall, just enough to keep the machine from making a sound loud enough for outsiders to hear. The company looked functional from the outside because I was inside it, in the walls, holding things together with systems and money and invisible labor. My father walked through the kitchen while I was on calls, preventing contract cancellations, and said, "Must be nice." He mocked my little laptop thing at Sunday dinner, and then asked me an hour later to rewrite a vendor response because he thought the client sounded upset, and he didn't know how to calibrate the tone. He introduced me to a new commercial client as my daughter. She's between things right now. Said it warmly, like a father covering for a struggling child, while I was, at that exact moment, managing 3 of that client's competitors' bid packages under my own company name. He used my competence like a household appliance. Present, functional, unremarkable. The refrigerator doesn't get thanked for keeping the food cold. The rest of the family took their cues from him. Jenna had learned early that aligning with our father was protection, and that mocking me was currency. She was 27, worked part-time at a wellness studio, spent the remainder of her time building a social media presence that hadn't quite taken off, and borrowed money from me with the practiced ease of someone who had never been told no. She paid back some of it, maybe 40% over 3 years, in small amounts, usually right before asking for more. Darren was my father's younger brother, 51, had run his own landscaping company into the ground in his mid-40s and had attached himself to Cole Precision like a barnacle. He did some installation work. He did more drinking. He was loudest at family dinners and first to the beer cooler at any event. And he had an opinion about my life that he delivered freely and often, usually about how women my age should have figured things out by now. My grandmother Patrice was 74, sharp, deeply religious, and had perfected the art of delivering cruelty with a layer of scriptural concern that made it almost impossible to confront directly. She didn't say mean things, she said worried things. She worried I was lost. She worried I was prideful. She worried what people thought. She worried that a woman without a husband and a visible career was a woman who had made wrong choices, and she worried about this at volume, in groups, on a regular basis.
Nobody coordinated it. That's the genius of a toxic family system. Once the hierarchy is established, everyone performs their role without rehearsal. What changed eventually was not their behavior. What changed was a single overheard conversation. One evening in early spring, I was in the kitchen when I heard my father in the backyard talking to Darren and a neighbor named Phil. I wasn't trying to listen. I was making coffee. My father said he was thinking about giving me 90 days to clear out. He said he'd been too soft for too long. He said, and this is the part I will never unhear, maybe if she actually hits bottom, she'll figure out what she's supposed to be. Darren said, should have done it 2 years ago. Phil laughed and said, better late than never. Jenna's voice came from the screen door. She was inside, maybe 10 feet from me, and she called out, honestly, Dad, I think it would be good for her. She didn't know I was there. I stood at the kitchen counter holding a coffee mug and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not hurt. Hurt was familiar. Hurt was Tuesday. This was something colder and much more focused. I set the mug down quietly, went to my room, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I named it Documentation. People assume revenge starts with anger. They picture someone throwing things, making dramatic phone calls, showing up with accusations. Mine started with a color-coded spreadsheet at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Not because I'm cold, because I'd watched my family long enough to understand one thing completely. Emotion was a weapon they used against me. Every time I got upset, the story shifted. I became the unstable one, the dramatic one, the one who couldn't handle constructive feedback. My father was a master at this. He could take any legitimate grievance I had, wait for me to express it with any feeling at all, and use that feeling to discredit the grievance entirely. See how she gets? This is what I'm dealing with. The only language he couldn't interrupt was evidence. And even then, he'd try. But evidence at least made him work for the reframe. So I built a record. I went back through 28 months of bank statements, card statements, emails, text messages, and company records I had legitimate access to. I created a timeline. Every financial contribution I had made to Cole Precision Signs or to family members went into a row: date, amount, category, description, source documentation. Direct company expenses I had covered: software, utilities, insurance, materials, vendor deposits, fuel transfers. Revenue I had recovered or protected: the $74,000 in collected receivables. The $58,000 contract saved by the insurance certificate catch. 3 projects I had pulled back from the edge of cancellation through client management. Estimated value of penalty avoidance on the tax filing corrections.
Unpaid labor. The hours I had worked on company operations, bid packages, client communications, and administrative cleanup. I used a conservative rate, well below what I charged external clients. I documented only what I could support. Personal transfers. Money given to Jenna, money given to Darren, grocery runs,
household expenses I had quietly absorbed. When the spreadsheet was complete, I sat back and looked at the total for a long time. Direct financial contributions to the company and family, $118,400 over 28 months. Estimated value of labor, crisis prevention, and recoverable losses I had personally intercepted. An additional $160,000 conservatively. All in, my presence in that house had been worth roughly $280,000 to people who had hung a banner calling me Deadweight. The cake with the couch on it suddenly seemed like a different kind of joke. Around this same time, a client I'd been working with for 2 years, a mid-sized facilities management company based in Seattle, offered me a long-term contract. Not a staff role, a retainer arrangement with enough stability and income that I could leave, rent somewhere decent, and stop subsidizing a household that treated me like a burden and used me like infrastructure. I signed the contract on a Tuesday. I put a deposit on a furnished apartment in Seattle on a Wednesday. I told no one. I began moving things out in batches, small enough that nobody noticed the gradual disappearance. Winter clothes one week, books the next, the kitchen equipment I had bought myself, the monitor my father had once gestured at and said, "Nice setup," as if it had appeared by magic. When you grow up in a family where every boundary becomes a negotiation and every decision you make is subject to group review, secrecy stops feeling like deception and starts feeling like oxygen. My father got to the formal eviction speech before I'd finished moving. He cornered me in the kitchen on a Thursday morning. I was reviewing a compliance packet for a client, headphones around my neck, and told me he wanted me out by the end of the month. He used the voice people use when they've rehearsed something and are proud of how reasonable they sound while delivering it. He said he was doing this out of love, that enabling me had done more harm than good, that no man with self-respect would want a woman who still lived with her father at 32, that he was embarrassed when clients came to the house and saw my car there on a weekday, that I needed a real job, a real life, and a wake-up call, and he's providing all three. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. "Do you want me gone, or do you want an audience when I go?" He want both. That was when I made my decision about how this was going to end. I could have handed in the spreadsheet right then. It would have been satisfying for approximately 90 seconds. Then he would have dismissed it, called me calculating, told the family I'd threatened him, and by the following weekend, the story would be that Mary had tried to extort her own father after he'd lovingly pushed her toward independence. No. If the truth was going to land, really land, it needed the right conditions. He gave me until Saturday to clear out. I nodded like a woman too beaten down to argue. Then I went to work. Thursday, I finished moving the last of my personal belongings to the storage unit I'd rented 3 weeks earlier. Friday, I spent 8 hours at my laptop and made the following changes. I removed my personal card from every vendor portal, subscription service, and autopay account connected to Cole Precision Signs. There were 11 of them. Project management software, design platform, 2 material supplier accounts, the production facility utility account, the company's general liability insurance auto renewal, the fuel card top-up, the off-site backup service for company files, the answering service they used for after-hours client calls, the industry association membership that kept them eligible for certain municipal bids. I did not cancel anything. I simply removed my payment method. I sent emails from the company account, which I had legitimate access to as the person who managed it, to 2 overdue clients, forwarding the exact invoice language my father had dictated. No softening, no professional framing, no translation. His words, his tone,
His meaning delivered raw to people who had been giving him patience because they'd received well-managed communication until now. I notified one primary material supplier that future emergency orders would require advance management approval and could not be expedited without a confirmed PO. This was standard protocol. It was also the removal of the informal fast track I had personally established with their rep over 18 months, which had saved 3 jobs. I updated the contact information on 2 active project files to remove my personal cell number and replace it with the company's main line, which Darren was supposed to monitor and frequently did not. I did one more thing. My father had a meeting the following Tuesday with the largest remaining commercial account, a regional property management firm that had stayed loyal through the company's rough stretch, largely because every interaction they'd had with Cole Precision for the past 2 years had been managed, in practice, by me. I had written their proposals. I had handled their revision requests. I had made my father sound, in writing, like a polished and competent operator. I did not sabotage this meeting. I simply did not prepare for it. For the first time in 2 years, my father would walk into a high-stakes client meeting with only what he himself had put together. Saturday afternoon, I drove back for the last banker's box and walked into the party.
The first 3 days after I left, nobody called. That's how entitlement works. It mistakes your absence for surrender. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally correctly identified me as the problem, removed me, and now things would normalize. The machine would keep running. It always had. The machine did not keep running. Monday. The project management software subscription lapsed at 9 a.m. when the auto-renewal attempted to charge the backup card that was no longer on file, and the primary card declined. The platform locked the company out of all active project data: work orders, material specs, install schedules, client communications, everything. 6 active jobs went effectively dark until billing was resolved. My father called me at 11:15. I didn't answer. At 2:30 p.m., the property management client sent an email to the company's general inbox, which Darren had failed to check that morning, flagging that the certificate of insurance attached to a resubmission had an incorrect policy date. This was a routine correction I would have caught and resolved before it ever reached the client. Instead, it sat unread for 4 hours until the client called directly and reached Darren, who did not know what a certificate of insurance was and said he'd have someone look into it. The client replied in writing, "Please advise by end of day or we will need to discuss continuity of this contract." My father called me 3 more times between 3 and 5 p.m. I let them ring. Tuesday. The answering service sent an automated notice that the account was suspended for non-payment. After-hours calls now went to a generic voicemail that nobody had set up, which meant callers heard a default carrier message and a mailbox that was full. A new client, a school district project my father had been excited about, a contract worth $34,000, left 2 messages and then called the company's main line. Darren answered, was unable to locate the project file, and suggested the client call back in the afternoon. The client did not call back. They emailed a competitor. My father called me 7 times on Tuesday. He left 4 voicemails. The first 3 were businesslike, asking me to just log in and fix the software billing, framed as a quick favor, nothing serious. The 4th was quieter. "Mary, I don't know what's happening with some of these accounts. I think there might be some things that were set up through you somehow. I'm not saying that's wrong, I just... Call me when you get this." Darren texted me from his personal number. "Hey, it's Dee. Your dad says there's some tech stuff going on. Can you call him? It's important." Jenna sent one line.
Dad needs you to log into some stuff. Stop being dramatic. I did not respond to any of them. Wednesday. The production facility received a shut-off notice from the utility company. The account had been on auto-pay, drawing from the method I had removed. The balance was not large, $340, but the notice had a 5-business-day window, and my father did not see it until late afternoon because it had gone to an email address he rarely checked. My father called me at 7:04 a.m. in a voice I had never heard from him before. Not angry, not dismissive. Something underneath those things. "Mary, sweetheart, I need you to call me back when you get this. There's some confusion around a few of the accounts. The shop power and a few of the vendor things. I think maybe some of the billing was still tied to your card and I didn't realize. We can sort this out. Just call me when you can." Confusion. He used the word confusion. For billing he had never once asked about, on accounts he had never once managed, attached to a card he had never once thanked me for. I nearly admired the architecture of his avoidance. Thursday. Darren left a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes and 40 seconds. He was sober, which was notable, and scared, which was new. He said he hadn't meant anything personal at the party. That was just how he got. I knew how he was. He said the business was in a rough patch, and if it went under, it would affect a lot of people. He listed people. He said my father was under enormous stress, and sometimes people said things they didn't mean. He said if I could just help with a few things, the software account, the van insurance, the supplier portal, he would personally make sure I got proper recognition going forward. Recognition. After 3 years and $280,000. My sister called in the evening, and when I didn't answer, she texted, "Mary, this isn't fair. You're hurting people who love you." The people who had printed 40 invitations to my humiliation. The people who had put my caricature on a cake. The people who had thrown a hot dog at my car while streaming it to the internet. People who love you. Friday. Jenna called twice and then video called, and when I didn't answer that either, she texted me 12 messages in 40 minutes. The med spa had cut her hours. She was short on rent. Dad had promised to help, but there was apparently something going on with money. She just needed $800. She would absolutely pay it back. She was so stressed. She hated asking, "Could I please just not make this into a thing?" Don't make this into a thing. That phrase had been my weather for a decade. Don't make it a thing when Darren made jokes about my weight at Christmas dinner. Don't make it a thing when my father used my bedroom as overflow storage for 3 months and acted surprised that I was bothered. Don't make it a thing when Jenna borrowed money and spent it before the week was out. Don't make it a thing when Grandma Patrice told me at Easter that a woman my age without a husband was either too proud or too broken, and either way needed prayer. My pain was always the thing. Their behavior was weather, natural, seasonal, not subject to review. I called Jenna back. She answered on the first ring, voice arranged into something that was meant to sound both distressed and reasonable. "Thank you for calling me back. Do you know why Dad can't help you right now?" I asked. Pause. "He just said there's some cash flow thing." "Cash flow thing," I repeated. "Yeah, why? What's happening?" "How much do you actually know about the business, Jenna?" "I mean, not the details. Why?" I told her I'd explain soon. Then I sent her one screenshot, 3 months of spreadsheet rows. Her name appeared in 14 of them. Our father's company appeared in 31. The shop utility account appeared in 9. I wrote underneath it, "Since you're curious about contribution." She didn't reply for 3 hours. Then, "Where did this come from?" "My records," I said. "I have 28 months of them." She went quiet again. Then, "How much?" "I'll show you when it's time." Saturday morning. My father called 6 times before noon. The first 2 were businesslike, deliberately controlled. He was framing this as a practical matter, a miscommunication about billing, something that could be resolved with a phone call. The third had an edge. "Mary, this is starting to affect real people, employees. Call me back." The fourth dropped the professionalism. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing, but you need to stop this and call me." The fifth was quiet in a way I didn't recognize. "I know you're angry, I hear that, but this is bigger than the 2 of us right now. Please." The sixth lasted 9 seconds. "Mary, please, I'm asking you." I listened to all 6 voicemails in a row, sitting in my Seattle apartment with coffee going cold on the desk beside me. Then I opened my laptop and began assembling the packet. Not revenge, not drama. Documentation. 34 pages organized with the clean logic of a professional deliverable, because it was one. A record of 3 years of hidden financial and operational support, assembled the way I would assemble any work product. Clearly, factually, without editorializing, because the facts were already doing enough. Cover sheet. My name, the company name, the date range, the total. Section 1. Timeline. A month-by-month narrative of my involvement with Cole Precision Signs, beginning with the payroll call at 11 p.m. and ending with the date I removed my payment methods. Not angry, just chronological. Every major intervention listed. Section 2. Direct financial contributions. Every payment I had made on behalf of the company or family members. Date, amount, category, description, supporting documentation. Organized into subcategories, color-coded, totaled by year and cumulative. Section 3. Revenue protected or recovered. The $74,000 in collected receivables, the contracts I had saved, the penalty costs I had intercepted, conservative estimates with methodology notes. Section 4. Unpaid labor, hours logged, rate applied, total. I used $65 per hour, well below my actual billable rate. The number was still significant. Section 5. Personal transfers. The money I had given to Jenna, to Darren, to household expenses. Every transaction with documentation. Section 6. Correspondence. Selected screenshots. Text messages where my father asked me to just handle this one thing. Voicemails from Darren about the van. Jenna's rent requests. A few emails from clients that would have been, without my involvement, disasters. Final page. 1 photograph. The banner over the garage. Red block letters. "Goodbye, Deadweight. Don't come back." My father at the grill in his apron. Darren on the porch with his beer. Jenna filming. Grandma Patrice under the umbrella. Neighbors laughing. All of them certain they were documenting my failure. I printed 3 copies. Then I called my father's largest remaining client. This part requires a word of explanation. I had managed the relationship with Hargrove Property Management for 2 years. I had written their proposals, handled their revision requests, managed their project timelines, and fielded their concerns. The account manager there, a woman named Diane, had my personal cell number and had used it often. She trusted the communication she received from Cole Precision because she trusted, without knowing it, me. When Diane's Tuesday email went unanswered for 4 hours and she'd gotten Darren on the phone, she had not been reassured. She had done what careful account managers do when a vendor relationship starts showing stress fractures. She had made a note. I called Diane on Saturday afternoon from my personal number, identified myself by name, and told her that I had been the primary operations contact for Cole Precision for 2 years, and that I was no longer with the company. I told her nothing negative about my father. I did not editorialize. I simply told her who I was, that I existed, that the competence she had experienced had had a name, And that name was not Richard Cole. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I thought the communication style had changed this week." "It did," I said. "I'd recommend requesting a new primary contact in writing and documenting the response time." I thanked her and hung up. On Monday morning, Hargrove Property Management sent Cole Precision a formal notice requesting a capabilities review before the next project phase would proceed. They CC'd their legal department. My father received this email at 8:47 a.m. He called me at 8:49.
I had told him. Public place, noon, Tuesday. He arrived 12 minutes early. I could see his truck in the lot when I pulled in, parked badly, nose too far into the space like he'd driven in without thinking about stopping. Darren was with him. Of course. Men like Darren existed in these situations as ballast, as witness, as the physical proof that someone else took the grievance seriously. My father believed that women became reasonable in the presence of other men. He had believed this for as long as I could remember. They were at a corner table. Neither had ordered. My father was sitting with his hands flat on the table, which was how he sat when he was trying to look contained. Darren had a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. I sat down across from them, put the packet on the table, and said nothing. My father looked at it. "What is this?" "The difference between your story and mine." He opened it the way people open things they expect to dismiss, quickly, with visible skepticism, performing confidence for an audience. That performance lasted until his eyes reached the first page total. I watched his face change in real time. Something moved through it that wasn't quite emotion yet, just recognition that the number in front of him was real. Darren leaned over, read the first page, and said very quietly, "Jesus Christ." My father turned pages. His jaw worked. "This is inflated." "Show me what's wrong." He pointed at a line. "This software wasn't personal. It was for the business." "Your business, your software, my card." Another page. "These fuel transfers were temporary. You knew that." 14 months, I said, across 3 cards, after you told me 3 separate times that payroll was stable. He flipped harder. "These numbers for Jenna. She was going to pay you back." She paid back 41% over 3 years. I documented what was repaid. The rest is what's in the file. Darren was reading the section on his van. He put his coffee down and didn't pick it up again. "Families help each other," my father said. "That's not a debt. You can't sit across from me and treat your own family like a collections agency." "Interesting framing," I said. "When I lived in your house, it was called freeloading. When you lived off my money, it was called family. I'm curious what the rule actually is." "Don't do this here." "With witnesses present? That was your preference. I believe you said both." He turned to Darren like he might find support there, but Darren was looking at a page that had his name on it 12 times and wasn't going to be useful. "Fine. Say you helped more than I realized." He closed the packet. "You were still living in my house. At 32. That counts for something." "It does," I said. "It counts for approximately the market rent differential over 34 months, which I included in the appendix. Subtract that from the total if you want. The number is still significant." He blinked. "If I had paid a stranger market rent and kept every dollar away from your business," I said, "you would have lost the production facility 18 months ago. If I had billed you at my actual rate for everything I fixed, you would be filing right now. The only reason you were able to call me Deadweight is because I loved you quietly enough to let you." He opened the packet again. He turned to the last page. He looked at the photograph for a long time. "You took this for leverage," he said. "I took it because I knew you'd say the party wasn't that bad." He closed the packet.
Something in his posture changed. Not remorse, not yet, maybe not ever. Risk assessment. "What do you want?" Darren asked. "What does this fix?" "Nothing," I said. "I don't want anything from you. That's the part you're still not understanding. I already paid. I'm not here to collect. I'm here because you wanted witnesses when I left, and I decided I'd have them when I explained why." My father's eyes came up. "Then what was the point of all this? Shutting everything down, the Hargrove notice?" "I didn't shut anything down. I removed my name from things I was paying for. As for Hargrove, I simply told their account manager who I was. She made her own decisions." "You're burning my company to the ground." "I stopped covering for it. Those are different things." He leaned forward. "You know what this does to people? Employees? People with families?" "I know exactly what it does," I said. "I'd been calculating it for 2 years. Here's what I also know. Every one of those employees kept their job longer because of me. Every one of those paychecks you made was at least partially funded by my emergency transfers. If you want to explain to your employees why the lights are off, you can tell them that the person who kept the machine running finally took her name off the accounts. I've left resources." I put a second envelope on the table. Inside, a list of small business financial consultants, a bookkeeping service, a utility assistance program for commercial accounts, an employment attorney for the staff, and the name of a business stabilization nonprofit. "That's what I'm offering," I said. "Information, not labor, not money, not one more rescue." I stood up. "If you walk out of here," my father said, "don't expect to come back when things turn around." I picked up my bag. "Dad, the only reason things ever turned around was because I was standing behind you and pushing. You didn't notice until I stopped." Then I left the diner, got in my car, and drove toward the interstate. I had one more stop to make.
3 weeks after the diner, when the dust had settled enough for me to see the shape of things, I filed a formal complaint with the State Labor Board, documenting the payroll irregularity from the Friday I had covered the gap, the one my father had accepted and never repaid, which, with proper documentation, constituted a reportable wage-related financial transaction with outstanding obligations. The complaint didn't demand payment. It created a record. It put my name on file as a documented party to the company's financial history. It meant that if the company ever went through a formal insolvency process, which, based on the Hargrove situation and the cascading vendor issues, was a real possibility, my contributions would exist in a form that had legal standing. I also filed an amended consultation invoice under my LLC for services rendered to Cole Precision Signs over the documented period. Not for the full amount, I knew it wouldn't be paid, but a properly filed commercial invoice with itemized services and the dates they were rendered becomes a matter of record. It establishes the relationship as professional, not familial. It reclassifies the dynamic. I sent the invoice by certified mail to the company's registered business address. My father called me 4 times after receiving it. I answered the 4th. "You're suing me." "I filed an invoice for services rendered. That's not the same thing." "This is your family, Mary." "You put that on a banner for the neighbors," I said. "I think we established what that means." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing. I don't want you to say anything. I want there to be a record that accurately reflects what happened. That's all I've ever wanted." I hung up. The collapse came quietly and in stages, the way these things always do. Hargrove Property Management did not renew. Their project manager sent a brief, professional email citing a desire to consolidate vendors. There was no drama, no confrontation, no bad review. Just a formal goodbye from a client who had been managed, without knowing it, by someone who no longer worked there. One supplier moved Cole Precision to cash-only terms after 2 late payments. Another declined a rush order, citing prior fulfillment issues. The production facility power stayed on. My father eventually paid the balance. But the rhythm of the company had broken in ways that weren't easily visible from the outside and weren't easily repaired from within. 3 months after the diner, Darren left. He didn't quit formally. He just stopped showing up with regularity, then stopped showing up at all. I heard through my brother that he and my father had argued about money, that Darren had accused my father of mismanaging everything, and that my father had said things that ended something between them. The irony of Darren finding my father unreasonable was not lost on me. Jenna moved out of the house by October, not because she chose to, but because my father could no longer cover any portion of her life. She got a second job. She called me once in November, not to ask for money, just to talk. We spoke for 40 minutes. At the end, she said, "I think I always knew you were keeping things together. I just didn't let myself think about what that meant." I told her I appreciated her saying so. "Did I ever actually thank you?" she asked. "No," I said, "but you're doing it now." We are cautious with each other, not like sisters in a movie, more like 2 people who shared something difficult and are still deciding how much of the rubble to sort through together. She is working on being honest. I am working on being open. Some weeks, that's enough. My grandmother called twice. The first time, she wanted me to understand that my father was struggling and that the Christian response to suffering was mercy, not distance. I told her I wished him well from a distance and that those 2 things were not actually in conflict. The second time she called, she didn't say any of that. She asked how I was doing. Just that. I told her I was well. She said she was glad. Then she said, "You were carrying more than I let myself see." I told her I knew, and that it would have meant something if she'd said so sooner. She said, "I know." That was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I'm still deciding what to do with it. About 5 months after the house went on the market, my father had to sell, not to downsize, because the mortgage was no longer manageable. He called me from a number I didn't recognize. He said immediately that he wasn't calling about money or the business. I told him that was good. There was a pause. Then he said he had found something while packing. A recipe card, my mother's handwriting. He'd thought I might want it. "You can mail it," I said. Another pause. Longer. Then, "Mary, did you really think I saw you that way? As Deadweight?" I thought about lying, about softening it, about the version of that answer that would make the conversation easier. "You put it on a banner," I said. "You had it professionally printed, at your own shop." He exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said, "I did." That was all. The recipe card arrived 4 days later. Pot roast. My mother's round, careful handwriting, the kind she used when she was writing something she wanted to keep. And at the bottom, in her shorthand, "Double the time if Richard's being difficult." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I framed it and hung it in my kitchen. People still ask whether I went too far, whether the invoice, the complaint, the Hargrove call, whether any of it was necessary. I've thought about that. Here's what I know. I didn't burn anything down. I removed my name from things I had built and paid for. I created records that accurately reflected what had happened. I let consequences arrive that I had been intercepting for 3 years. The things that broke were already broken.
I had just been standing in the way. If someone builds a house of cards and pays you to keep the wind off it, and then throws a party to celebrate firing you, they don't get to call you a villain when the cards fall. They get to stand in the rubble and think about the choices that got them there. My father lost a lot in those months. He'd tell you I caused it. The spreadsheet tells a different story. I was never the dead weight. I was the foundation, invisible, essential, and foolishly loyal to people who had decided that the most useful version of me was also the one easiest to discard. My father's greatest mistake wasn't the banner. It wasn't the cake, the invitations, the hot dog, the crowd of neighbors. His greatest mistake was forgetting that the person he humiliated in that driveway was the same person who knew exactly where every support beam was and knew exactly how to stop holding them up. Darren sent me a message on New Year's Eve, just 4 words. "You were right. Sorry." No punctuation except the period. I didn't reply, but I saved it. I still have the photo, the banner, the grill, the cake with a couch on it. My father in his boss of the grill apron, arms wide, completely certain of himself. What he thought he was documenting was my shame. What he actually captured was the last moment before I stopped being the reason his world held together. I don't regret the spreadsheet. I don't regret the invoice. I don't regret the call to Diane at Hargrove. I don't regret the labor board filing, the certified mail, the packet on the diner table. I regret staying long enough to confuse being used for being loved. And I will never regret the moment I finally understood the difference. The invitation said Freedom Cookout. Turns out he was right about that part. The freedom was mine.
And that's the story. This girl's dad wanted to celebrate her failure, but ended up celebrating his own downfall. What do you think about this? Smash that like button, subscribe. This was Effie Revenge. See you in the next story.